Good day, class. As promised last week that we're going to have our new topic for today. And today our lesson is about practicality, efficiency, and ethics. At the end of this module, you are expected to identify terms related to practicality, efficiency, and ethics. You'll be able to analyze basic concepts and principles in practicality, efficiency, and ethics. You can examine how ethics are considered in preparing and administering assessment. Because of the reason of the importance of time and resources of teachers, development of the test and grading skills should be efficient and practical. Practical means useful, which means it should be used for the improvement of instruction and for outcome assessment purposes. In the process of assessment, ethics and teachers' responsibility are also important. Aside from being a technical activity, it is likewise a human activity. Okay, so there are 6 ways on how testing can be made practical and efficient. The first one is familiarity with the method. It is true that teachers should utilize different methods of assessment. Rule of the thumb should be considered in giving assessment, and that is simple learning targets. Time is required. This is a matter of choice. It hinges on the choice of teachers with regards to the assessment method. A good example is the multiple choice of test. It may take time for a teacher to prepare such type of test, but for the students, it can be accomplished in a relatively short period of time. Is in administration. Assessment should be easy to administer. Instruction in the test should have a clear and complete instruction so as to avoid questions during administration. Is of scoring. Selected response tests are objectively marked because of the reason of having one correct or best answer for each item. In performance tests, time spent in grading is reduced because descriptors in the rubrics and the performance levels are there to be used in rating the performance of students in specific activity or task. Ease of interpretation. Given scores to students will be useless and meaningless if this will not be interpreted. Objective tests are the easiest to interpret. The last is the cost. Some of the tests seem to be costly compared to other assessment methods. Either it is a classroom assessment and performance assessment. Teachers should learn how to encourage students to use indigenous and recycled materials so as for them to be able to eliminate cost in taking assessments. Again, the type of assessment to be utilized should be fit to the learning target. Observing ethical standards in testing. Just remove this camera here. Okay. Students' knowledge of learning targets and assessment. This aspect of fairness refers to transparency. Through this, the students could adequately recognize the importance of assessments as well as how to prepare for it. For the performance assessment, prior to the assessment, the criteria should be divulged so the student should be aware of what the teacher is for in the actual product or performance. Opportunity to learn. Because of the breadth of content that has to be covered in addition to limited or lost classroom time, there are teachers who are forced to give reading assignments. Because of this, students may be put to a disadvantage because they were not given ample resources and time to sufficiently assimilate the material. And so to address the situation, extra time may be allotted as a makeup for the session missed, and encouraging team review is advisable. Prerequisite knowledge and skills. If the students doesn't possess background knowledge and skills, they may perform poorly in an assessment. For instance, pupils in grade 1 were taught about inverse proportion. They will not be able to develop a schema if they are not able to connect the meaning of proportion, even if they know its meaning. So early identification on the prerequisite skills necessary for completing an assessment should be done by the teacher. Assessment items and procedures can be analyzed by the teacher and later determine the pieces of knowledge and skills required to answer them. Avoiding stereotyping. What is a stereotype? According to the same source, stereotype refers to generalization of a group of people based on inconclusive observation of a small sample of this group. Racial and gender are the common stereotype. Stereotyping is caused by preconceived judgments of people one comes in contact, which are sometimes unintended. A stereotype may either be positive or negative. An example is how foreigners regard Filipinos. Filipinos are hardworking and hospitable individuals. That is positive. But Filipinos are caregivers and domestic helpers. That is negative. So it's generalization. You say Filipinos, you generalize all Filipinos are domestic helpers, they're all caregivers. Students' performance in examination may be affected by stereotypes. To undermine the effect of stereotype threats, a system should be created such as multicultural curriculum implementation. So I hope all schools have this implementation, multicultural curriculum implementation. I think this is a vital needs for all the schools. Avoiding bias in assessment tasks and procedure. By avoiding bias, which ensures equity, can be difficult and complex affair. Bias is usually an unintended assessment process consequence. So there are two forms of bias. A, offensiveness. This is a form of bias which happens when test takers get distressed, distracted, or upset about how an individual or particular group is portrayed in the test. The content of assessment may have slurs, stereotypes, particular ethnic, religious, or any group, which can cause undue discomfort. B, unfair penalization. Student performance is harmed by the unfair penalization due to test content, not because items are offensive, but rather the content catered to some particular groups. Accommodating special need. Teachers should be sensitive to the needs of the students. Certain accommodation should be given, especially for those who are mentally and physically challenged. The following are the legal basis for accommodation. Republic Act 7277, Section number 12, an act providing for rehabilitation, self-development, and self-reliance of disabled persons and their integration in the mainstream of the society and for other purposes. CHAD Memorandum 09, Section year 2013, enhanced policies and guidelines on student affairs and services. The first legal basis talks about the access to quality education. That learning education should consider the special needs of learners with disabilities in terms of class schedules, facilities, physical education, requirement, and other matters. 4 categories of accommodation. Setting. Setting accommodation or a change of location, students receive instruction, the conditions of an instructional or assessment setting. So, whether the student should be in the general education setting with the same age peers or in a smaller group should be considered. Timing. The allowable time to complete assignments, activities, and the way the time is organized are changed by timing and scheduling. Okay, so these provide students the needed time and breaks to complete activities, assignment, the time of the day or number of days over which an activity of number of days of activity will take place. Examples, frequent breaks, extra time, time of day, multiple test sessions. So those are the examples. Presentation. Presentation, okay, so these are the third category. Okay, access to instruction and assessment in ways that do not require them to visually read standards point is allowed by the presentation accommodations. So these are the examples: magnifier, auditory amplification, devices like hearing aids or noise buffers, large printer braille, text-to-speech, human reader or sign language interpreter. Response. Response accommodation benefits students who have difficulty with memory, directionality, sequencing, alignment, and or organization. Okay, so important elements should be taken into account. So you can read it, just move it. Nature and extent of the student's disability. Time and degree of disability possessed by the students should be taken in consideration in giving accommodation. For instance, a student moderate visual impairment will need a larger print edition of assessment or special lighting condition. Type and format assessment. Type and format assessment are matched with accommodation to be given to students. Accommodations differs on the length of assessment, mode of response, time allotted, and others. Nature and extent of the student's disability. Time and degree of disability possessed by the students should be taken in consideration in giving accommodations. For instance, student moderate visual impairment will need a larger print edition of assessment or special lighting condition. Type and format assessment. Type and format of assessment are matched with the accommodation to be given to students. Accommodation differs on the length of assessment, mode of response, time allotted. Competency and content being assessed. The level of performance or content with the assessment measures are not altered by accommodation. For instance, in mathematics, if the objective is to add and subtract numbers quickly, extending time would not be logical accommodation to provide to learners with disability. Okay, so relevance, one of the observing ethical standards in testing. Another aspect of fairness is the relevance. An important assessment would not mean by giving students worthwhile assessment experiences. Knowledge and skills, which are most important for students to learn, should be reflected in the assessment. Every student's opportunity to learn things that are important should be important by the assessment. Teachers and individual learners should be taught by the assessment of something which they do not already know. ethical issues. Asking students to answer sensitive questions like problems in the family or about sexuality are unwarranted, especially without the consent of parents. Students' grades and teachers' report generated from using unreliable and invalid test instruments are not just which results to misleading and inaccurate interpretations. Ethics as one of the principles of high quality assessment should consider informed consent and anonymity and confidentiality in first gathering data, recording data, and reporting data. Ethic in assessment pertains to the process of weighing whether practices related to assessment belongs to right and wrong sides. Thank you. So that's my lesson for today. Hope you learned a lot. I'll see you next week. Please, everyone, be safe. Bye.